Hello and welcome to the absolute beginners of Unity. And today we are going to look at if you've never used Unity before, if you've never coded before, and we're going to go through all of those bits and bobs and basics, stuff like that. Okay, so you can get nice and comfortable with Unity. So all I've done is clicked on Unity Hub, and if you haven't downloaded Unity, I've got another video on how to install Unity as well to help you folks out. So what we're going to do here is going to create a brand new project. So what we're going to do is go to New up here. We're going to click on the arrow, and I'm just going to choose 19.2. I'm using 19.2 or 2019.2, but if you have 19.2 or further on, that's absolutely fine. Do not worry. So I'm going to click onto this, and this will give me an idea of what I want to do for my project. So what we're going to do at the moment, just going to click on 3Ds. We've got 3D down here as well. We've got 2 3Ds for some reason and 2 2Ds. No idea why. But I'm just going to click on a 3D, and what we're going to call this is first project. This is what we'd call it. There we go. And then what I can do is I'm just going to choose a nice space to upload and keep all my documents. I'm also just going to create a new folder, call this Unity, and everything will be cool and just be created in here. So I know I can go to this Unity folder and everything will be in there. There we go. So we've got that lovely location, and then I'm going to click Create, and Unity will work away and create a project for me. So this may take a bit of time. Unity is quite a big program, obviously, because we're making games. Cool, there we go. Unity is loaded up. And this is what Unity should look like for you. At the moment, yours may look a little bit different. Yours may look like, let's just change this to default. So your Unity may look like this. If it does, do not worry. From working with Unity over the years, you kind of get into the fashion of using different things. So what I'm going to do is go up to this where it says default here, and I'm going to change my layout to tool, where it's going to pop into this view here. And then I'm going to make sure that my game tab, because we've got a game tab here and a scene tab. I'll go through those in just a second. What I'm going to do is click on my game tab and click and drag this so it fits down just like that. So I've got my 2 scenes, so I can see everything in front of me, so it's nice and clear. So welcome to Unity. At the moment it does look a bit plain and boring here, but don't worry, we'll sort that out very, very quickly. So the first 2 things that you notice is this kind of scene view. So this is everything that we will add into our game, and from sort of a game maker's point of view. The screen underneath us is our camera, which is here, and this is what we will view within our game. Okay, so this is our editor view, essentially. Our scene view is for all editing, adding in assets, colouring things, polishing. And here is what the audience or player would see within their game. We then have our hierarchy, which is almost like a layers system, where we have our directional light, which you can see here. And as I click on each of these pop up within our scene view, because that's our editor view, and our main camera. And they're the only 2 things we have in our scene at the moment, which is absolutely perfectly fine. When you see I click on these 2 different icons, you can see that I have within my inspector a main camera, and the main camera is positioning, as you can see here, as well as the camera component itself and the inner workings of that camera. So whenever we want to add things or edit that camera, we would go into the inspector. And that's exactly the same for the directional light here as well. As we can see, intensity is at 1, but we could easily change that intensity to 0.7, or we could lower that intensity to absolutely nothing. And actually, I don't think it's actually going to do anything. It won't do anything until we've probably got some objects in there, so I'll just set that to 1. But we can edit our light or our directional light within our game scene as well from this direction. Okay, so what we're going to do is have a look at our projects tab down here, and this is where we're going to add our prototype project to start understanding the principles of games design. So what we're going to do is jump to Moodle, and I'll probably skip the video to jumping onto Moodle. Make sure you know you log in for Moodle, and we can get started with downloading that driving pack. So I'm in Moodle now, and as you can see, this is what your Moodle looks like, and what we're looking for is the driving game Unity package. Okay, so this should be under a specific unit you're being taught at the time, or under Unity assets. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click and download driving game Unity package, and there we go. We can see it in there, and that will probably jump into my downloads folder. Even if you're on Mac or PC, it should download into your downloads folder. So what I'm going to do is right click here and in my projects section and go to import package, custom package, and go to downloads and click on prototype 1 starter files and Unity package. We click on that and we get lots of different things that we can import and download here. What I'm going to do is click imports, and we can now see a new folder called course library has opened. And we can also see, if we jump into our scenes folder here, we can see that we've got prototype 1 and sample scene. What we're going to do is that we don't need this scene here, but we do like the prototype 1 scene. So what I'm going to do is, what I should probably do first is right click onto this prototype scene. Oh, actually, we're not going to save that. So let's delete this scene first. So we'll just click delete scene, delete, and we'll double click on prototype 1 and click save. Cool, lovely. So let's just delete that scene because we don't need it. Delete. There we go. So we've only got this prototype 1 scene here. And as you can see, we've got a road and some hills and maybe some stars, some mountains here within our scene. So what we need to do is have a look at the controls. So we can see that we've got some controls up here, and these are guided by our Q, W, E, R, T, Y, and T controls on our keyboard. If you want the keyboard shortcuts, so that's Q, W, E, R, and T. So what we can do is, if we grab our hand tool, we can click on this, we can grab around and move around our scene. If we want to rotate around our scene, we can right click and this eye pops up, and then we can look around our scene. So if we right click on our mouse, we can rotate around our scene, and then obviously we can zoom in with our rotating, what am I thinking? Scrolling ball on our mouse. So, and we can also, if we want to focus on an area but rotate around the area, we can hold Alt on our keyboard, click, and we can look around that certain area as well. So they're the simple controls of using Unity. So here we have a road, and a road going to nowhere with our camera, a directional light, and our environment. As we can see here, we can click on each of these properties within hierarchy. So what we're going to do is, within our projects folder down here, we're going to have a look in our course library and have a look at our vehicles, and we're going to add one of these vehicles. So as we click on one of these within our projects folder, we can see in Inspector the information pops up here. So what we can do, which is really a really good bonus, is that we can actually drag this small kind of preview window up here. As you can see, that little icon to drag something up, and we can pull this up and actually inspect our vehicle. So we can see it's just a low poly vehicle. Lovely, and that looks fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this van into my game scene right at the start of my road here. So what I'm going to do is just click and drag, and remember, this is our game scene, this is our edit scene, so I'm going to drag it into my edit scene here. Lovely. So there's my van right at the start, put it on the left side of the road because we're British. Lovely, fantastic. So there is my car or my van, and as we can see, it says vehicle van green Z. So lovely, that's fantastic. Cool. So once we've done that, we can see that if I click on my move tool, I can see if I'm selected on my van, I can actually move my van up and down, left and right, etc, etc. So that makes things nice and easy, and we can go Command and Z or Control and Z to put him back into that position. So what we're going to do is we're now going to look at our obstacles and put an obstacle in our way. So let's put a crate in the way of our car. Lovely, fantastic, just like that. And again, we can see that crate is there as well. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our green van vehicle, and I'm just going to name this to player, rename this as player, because it makes things a lot easier, because this is who we'll be playing as. So it's really good to name things and have a good understanding of those principles of games design. So we know whenever someone else comes into your game, they can know that this green van is the player instead of 0 crates and vehicle Z, X, 2, 1, everything like that. So it's really, really simple and easy to understand. Okay, so what we can do next is if we click on our camera here, we can see that our camera is here. So we can either zoom into our camera, or we can double click onto our camera and this shows a view of our camera here. Or if we want to focus, we can press F. And so double click and F is the same thing. So if I zoom out and then press F, that focuses on our camera. And at the moment we can see our camera is doing a side view, a side scrolling view of our van. So what we're going to do is move our camera behind our vehicle. So as you can see, if I move, as I'm moving my camera left and right, we can see in the transform at the top here on the position of Z, our camera is moving. Okay. So what we need to do is make sure that we can put our camera behind our vehicle in like a third person kind of view. So what we're going to do is, at the moment, the rotation of our camera, so if we click on the rotate tool up here, we can rotate our camera and see that it's affecting our Y, X and Z axis as we rotate around. So what we want to do really is probably rotate this camera from -80 to 0. There we go, fantastic. And then what we can do is then grab our move tool and move. We can zoom out and move what's a bit close to our van. There we go, fantastic. So we've rotated our camera on the Y-axis to 0 because it was originally on -90, and now we've created this really nice third-person view for our van. Fantastic. So if we just recap of what we've done, we've set up the project initially and imported those assets from Moodle. We've positioned our vehicle at the start of the road. We put an obstacle in the way of our vehicle, and we positioned the camera behind the vehicle as well. So we've got already this really nice little setup, and hopefully this works as a kind of really nice little intro into understanding all the different parts of Unity. So what we're going to look at now is get things moving. Let's get this game going kind of thing. So what we need to do is we need to create our first script to get this vehicle moving. So what I'm going to do is click on Assets folder. So this brings me back to my original folders. And I'm going to create a new folder. So what I'm going to do is right click, go to Create, and I'm going to go to Folder. And then going to call this Scripts. If you watch any other tutorials or keep watching the tutorials with myself or other Unity products, you will see that this is again a standard thing of keeping everything nicely in folders and well organized. So what we're going to do is, now we've created scripts, we're going to double click into that folder, right click again, go to Create, and create a C# script. So as you can see, it wants us to name it straight away. I'm going to name this player controller with no spaces, okay? So a script doesn't have any spaces in it when we name it, and we're going to make sure that this doesn't either. So when we click on this script, we can see straight away that we can see our public class player controller with no space is there, and that works perfectly. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take this script and drag it into our player. So I'm going to drag this up, and then we can see that arrow icon, and that will fall into here. So then we can look at our inspector, and now we can see our player controller script, and it creates the space for us, is within our vehicle. Cool, so we need to add some code to this script. So what we're going to do is just double click on our script, and if Unity is installed properly, you'll have Visual Studio open up, and we can start writing our script. Lovely, once Visual Studio is open, I'm just going to get rid of this so we can see it, and I'll make this a little bit bigger. We can see that this script is easily talking to Unity Engine, as it says using Unity Engine, and we have a public class called player controller, which is what we named it, and this is acting in mono behavior. So this is acting as one channel and going to affect whatever this script is added to, so what objects it is added to. So at the start of our script, we have something called void start and void update. So, and we have some script or some text above that. This is called pseudocode, okay? Pseudocode is code within the script that won't affect the script at all. So, as you can see, it's these two slashes that's controlling this. If I delete these, we can then see we get all of these red lines and errors pop up already. So if we put those two lines back, that only works as just basic text that won't affect our game. So void start is called before the first frame update. Okay, so even before your game begins, your game is starting up things. So it could be starting up something to do with the player, some power-ups, menus, options menus, and things like that. And that all code, and that kind of code would go all into void start. So once your game has started, it will then be updated once per frame, as it says here. So games within Unity and typically all games run at 60 frames per second. Okay, so that's quite a high frame rate. But that's good for us. That's great. That means we've got some really nice, good quality games popping out here. So we put a lot of code into update because we want it to update our game regularly. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some pseudocode in, just like we see here. And what we want to do first is move our vehicle forward. So we're going to do some slashes. And we're going to say move the vehicle forward. Okay, so we know this script doesn't affect our code at all. Okay, so let's write our first line of code. What we would like our vehicle to, we want our vehicle to move. Okay, so what we need to do is what initially moves our vehicle in Unity. So if we go back into Unity, click on our player vehicle, we can see that we've got transform right at the top. We talk about position, rotation, and scale. So if I drag, I want my van to move this direction. So it's moving, as you can see here, on the Z axis. So I'm going to want to move my vehicle on its Z axis using transform. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my script, and the first thing I'm going to say is transform. Okay, and that should pop up in this little prompt, and transform goes there. Fantastic. So if I transform my position, my vehicle will dot into different areas. And what I mean by that, if I change the transform dot position, my vehicle will go from here to then suddenly here. It won't be translating, it won't move from there to there. So what I need to do is say transform dot translate. Okay, so I'm going to say transform dot translate, that pops up. So what I now need to do is I need to move this forward. So I know that if I click on my player here and move this arrow forward, I'm moving on my Z axis, okay? So, but we need to say what's happening to our X, Y, and Z all at the same time, okay? So I want my vehicle to move at one speed across there and moving on my Z, okay? So what we're going to do in our script is say transform.translate, and we're going to do a bracket, and we're going to write 0 for our X because I don't want to move on my X value. I'm going to write 0 for my Y because I don't want to move on my Y value, and I'm going to write 1 here because that's the direction I want to move in at 1 speed, so. Okay, and then to cap off any piece of script that we write, we're going to use a semicolon. So we put a semicolon there, and there we go. Our script is complete. Okay, so we're saying transform, so we're calling out transform. We're saying translate is going to move our vehicle, and then we're saying we're not moving on the X, we're not moving on the Y, but we are going to move 1 on the Z. Okay, so and as you can see, I've made sure my script is encapsulated within my void update and in between these brackets. That's really important. We can't just randomly put transform dot position here. It just doesn't work. Already we've got red lines. It just doesn't work. We need to make sure they are within methods. Okay. Later on we'll look at creating our own methods, but for now we're going to make sure this script works. So Control S or Command S on your script. We then go back into Unity. And if we watch our scene here, if I press play, our vehicle should, there we go, zoom off because we've asked it to move 1 on the Z. Fantastic. So that is 100% working. Really, really pleased with that. Really, really good start. Okay, so there is other ways we can move our script as well. Okay, so let's have a look at an alternative version. So if we sudo this out, so it doesn't affect our script, again, we still want to move our vehicle forward. But this time, what we're going to say is transform.translate, transform.translate, not transform. There we go, transform.translate. And this time, instead of saying the 0, 0, 1, we're going to say vector3.forward. Okay, so vector 3 represents our vehicle, so represents our object. Okay, a vector is the object, and 3 represents the X, the Y, and the Z axes. Hence, why we don't have to put it in here. And forward is the forward position within our world. So if we look at our world space, we can see that we're on local or global space, and if we click on our vehicle, we can see that we are facing our Z axis. So if we change it to local or global, this doesn't matter at the moment. With some things that if you change the orientation to global to local, it could change the axes of an object, but here it's not. So forward motion is our Z axis. Okay. So if we go back into our script, and with transform.translate, let's save this again. So Control S, and then if we press play, we have the same thing. Okay, so there's 2 different ways of making an object move there. Use whichever makes it more comfortable for you. Okay, so now let's look at customizing the vehicle's speed, because that vehicle was it was sort of kind of driving off a bit mental, wasn't it? So what we can do is if we go back into our script, we can see that we can edit our speed. So what we're going to do by that is by saying, if let's say we times our forward movement by something called time.delta time, what this means is that this just brings our game into real time. Okay, so if we just quickly save this with just time.delta time, if I press play again, our vehicle will go tremendously slow, because 1 unit in real time is actually quite slow, as you would guess. Like 1 mile per hour is quite slow in movement in any kind of capacity. 1 is slow, 100 would be quite fast. So that kind of resets our speed, okay, with time.delta time. So what we're going to do is that we are going to create a speed for it. So if 1 is quite slow, let's try 20. Okay, so we'll times this. So 1 times 20 equals 20. So let's save this. So our new speed is 20. So if we press play, our speed has now gone up to 20 from that 1. So it's quite a nice speed, actually. Quite happy with that. Cool, but I don't want to go into my scripts every time to edit my speed. How can I edit the speed just from my player? We can do that. And what we need to do is we can create a variable for that. Okay? So what we're going to do is if we double click onto here, and we're going to put variables up the top. So if someone else looks at our game, they can see what other variables we have in there. So what we're going to call this, we're going to call this a public float, and we're going to call this speed, and this is going to equal 20, the same as, not 30, 20. This will equal the same as our speed down here. So what public represents is, and public class here, is that the whole game and everything within our game can see this, see public work within our game. Okay, so a float represents a decimal number and not a whole number, and our speed is just what we've called 20 here. Okay, so what we're going to do is, now we've called this a public float, what we're going to do within our speed here is change this and just write speed, because we've created a variable for it. And as you can see, if we click on speed, it pops up within our code here as well. So if I then save this, I can see that if I click on my player now, under my player controller script, you can see that I've got speed and it says 20. So I can edit this whenever I like. So if I press play, there we go, there's my card popping off at speed. If I press pause this, change this speed to 5, press enter, press play again. Oh, sorry, make sure that is on 5 again. Press 5, press play. There we go. So I can now edit my speed while my game's playing. I can change this to 15, press enter. There we go, got the speed. I could even probably put -6, and it's even going backwards. Cool. Lovely, fantastic. So we can now control our speed without going to our script all the time. And that's called a variable that we've created there. Okay, so now we've got that. What we need to do is let's add some physics to our game. So let's make sure our car is back onto the speed of 20. If we press play, we can see our vehicle driving off. And if we double click onto it, let's follow our car again, and as we can see, if we keep following it, it's floating, it's not going off anywhere, it just keeps traveling, and as we keep turning around, there we go, our car is going off into the distance. So we need to add some kind of physics, so gravity essentially, to our vehicle. And what we need to do is click on player here, make sure it pops up on our inspector, and what we're going to add, we're going to add component, and we're going to call this rigid body. I'm going to add a rigid body to this vehicle. And essentially, we're going to make sure that use gravity is ticked and mass is 1, so we have some kind of gravity. And then if we press play, you'll see as our vehicle kind of drives off, it's actually hit that object flying off and gone into a bit of a tailspin. There we go, it's gone. So if we play that again, there we go. If we press play, so once we add physics to our vehicle, it will collide with objects and freak out a little bit. So, but there we go. And then gravity will kick in for our vehicle. Lovely, fantastic. That's exactly what I want. But we also want to add a rigid body to our crate as well. Or we can rename this as obstacle. So if we rename this as obstacle, Lovely. So once we've done that, we're going to add a rigid body to this as well. And let's see what happens when they drive into each other. So bashing each other, and it also makes the crate fly as well. So that's giving physics to our crate and our vehicle as well. Okay, fantastic. Cool. So what we're now going to look at is we've added our speed variable, and what we need to do is, at the moment when we press play on our game, usually when we play our game, our camera would usually follow our player, wouldn't it? Just like in any other kind of normal AAA third-person game or even indie game that we would make. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a brand new script. So make sure we're in our scripts folder. We're going to right click, go to create, C# script, and we're going to call this script follow player, because that's exactly what this script's going to do. We're going to make sure this script follows our player, and we're going to attach this to our main camera. Okay. So what we need to do is, let's make sure that script's gone in there first. There we go, follow player. Let's double click on that. And then we've got our brand new script. So we can see that Visual Studio tabs our script. So we've got one script there, and we have another script of follow player there. So what we need to do is this, firstly, once we've created that variable, so originally this variable was a float of speed of 20. This time we need to call up our player because we want this script to follow that object, okay? So the way we make that object pop up is we say public, so it can be seen by the game and other scripts. And we're going to say game object because we want it's an object within our game, which is our vehicle. And then we can just call this player because that's what we want to make it to be followed. So then in update, we can say transform.position. So that's the position of this camera, so where the script is lying. And what we want to say is we want that equal to the player's transform dot position. And we're going to do a semicolon on that as well. So we want our position of our camera to be the exact position of our player. Okay, so let's Control S or Command S on this. And if we press play, it probably might go a bit weird. Oh, why did that not work? There we go. So, so, oh, I know why that didn't work. And it will tell us down here. There we go. We didn't drag the variable in. So what we need to do is if we look on our camera, now we've saved our script, it's asking for an empty game object. It wants our player because it doesn't know who to follow. We've just created this as an empty game object. So if we grab our player and drag them into there, we can then press play. And our vehicle, our camera is now following our vehicle, but is in a very precarious position. And as you can see, we need to change that position. We need to create an offset position, because if our camera is an exact place in the center of our vehicle, that doesn't create a good view for creating our game, does it? So no, it's not looking too great here. So let's go back into our follow player script. And what we need to add is, as I've said, is something called an offset, okay? So we can work from this script here. We haven't done anything wrong with this piece of script within void update. And what we can say is that we're going to create a new vector 3. Okay, so as we know, vector 3 represents the object itself, and we know that X, Y, and Z represent, and the 3 represents the X, Y, and Z. So we're going to create a new position for our camera. Okay, and that new position, let's change this to 0, 5, and -7, and put a semicolon. So we've talked about the X, Y, and Z. So this is the brand new vector 3 position. We're going to save this. And if we press play on our game, we should have a brand new position. Lovely, there we go. We've got a brand new position for our vehicle. That looks a lot better. So if we wanted to change this position, so let's say I like the position where my camera is at the moment. What I could do is look at the position on my camera, which is minus 3.95, 3.5, and minus 16.92. So let's change that to that. Let's see if it looks any better. Cool. So let's change our x to, it says minus 3.95, and I'm going to make sure, because it's a decimal place, it's a float, so I'm going to put an F after it. Then this is 3.5, 3.5, and then I'm going to again put an F because it's in a decimal place, and then I'm going to make this minus 16.92, and again I'm going to put an F there to represent it as a float. So this is the brand new position of our camera. Let's save that and press play. So this should then stay in the exact position. Oh, it's gone a bit weird. So maybe a little bit on the rotation, but that's absolutely fine. That looks quite a nice position actually. So let's quickly move our obstacle out of the way. Put that over there, press play. There we go. That's a nice position. I quite like that. That looks kind of cool. Fantastic. So, okie dokie. So, let us see what we can do next. So let's allow our vehicle to move left and right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're again going to go back into our player controller. And I'm just going to delete that piece of script there because we've been using vector 3. That's absolutely fine. And what we're going to say is now we need to turn, let's say we want to turn just right, for example. So what we're going to say is we know that transform will move us. We know translate will also move us. So this is correct. And then again, we know vector 3 moves an object. So let's say vector 3. This time we don't want to move forward, we want to move right. So why don't we put dot right and do the same thing again. So if we say times by time dot delta time, and that will times our speed by 1. So we may, when we start moving, we would move right very slowly. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell. So let's quickly change our vehicle speed to just 5. And if we start to press play, we're slowly kind of moving right. As you can see on our Z and our X axes, we're slowly, very slowly moving right, but not enough to really tell what's happening. So what I'm going to do is quickly have a look at this script, and what we can see is that we need to add another variable. Like we have speed, we need to add something for turn speed. Okay, so let's have a quick look at this and let's create a brand new variable. Let's call this again public float. Instead of speed, we'll call this turn speed. And let's equal this to, oh, I don't know, what should our turn speed be? Maybe we can just, let's see what 10 does, 10f. And then we can write, again, just like we did with speed, times by turn speed. Cool, so this will also create a variable within our script. So if we save this, go back to Unity, turn speed should pop up in our script on player. So if we click on player, we've now got turn speed at 10. So if we press play, there we go. We're turning, moving to the side, but got our script working. Fantastic. So I'm just going to go back to this and I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to worry about that. That's fine. So what we're going to do is, once we've done that, is I would like to control the speed of our vehicle, control the turning of our vehicle. That would be really, really cool, because then we can almost create like an endless runner. So what I want to do is not have a look at follow camera, have a look at this. And we're going to create a brand new variable for our player controller. So I'm going to leave this as a bit of a gap. And I'm going to call this again a public float because it makes things a lot easier. And I'm going to call this my horizontal input. Okay, there's a reason I've used that name, because we want to move horizontally, so move from left to right. Okay, so what we're going to do is at the start of this script, I'm going to write horizontal input, because that's our variable that we've created, equals input dot get axis horizontal. So what do I mean and what have I done here? How do I know this? Okay, so Unity has its own input system. So if you're not unsure what an input system is, it's your controls, moving left, right, up, down, jump, fire, everything like that. And this is already inputted and embedded into Unity. So what we can do, if we have a look at Unity, if we go up to Edit and go to Project Settings, and in these project settings that have been crushed, let's fan them out a bit. If we go into Input here, we can see we've got axes. So if we click on this, we can see we've got a vertical, we've got a horizontal, a vertical, fire, jump. So Unity have already created loads of different types of movement input for us. And as we can see, if we click on horizontal, we can see that our negative button is left, positive button is right, and also our alternative negative and positive buttons are A and D. Okay, so what I've done is essentially gone to input, axes, and called up horizontal within our script here. And as you can see, I've spelt it exactly. So I've quoted it with these quotation marks here. Okay, so I've quoted horizontal. So what I then need to do is I need to get horizontal into my turning. So what I'm going to say is turn speed times by my horizontal input. Okay, and then Command S or Control S. And then if I go back here and if I then press play, I'll be able to move right and left. So then we can start creating our endless runner game. Awesome, fantastic. So I hope this has been a really good kind of intro to Unity for you. As I said, there's lots to learn, but we've got the basics there. So what I would like you to do is, with what you've learned today, could you create a very, very basic prototype endless runner? Create obstacles, make sure you can drive past those obstacles, and make sure you can get to the end of your road. You can extend the road, you can duplicate it, copy and paste it and extend it, entirely up to you. But I hope you have fun in creating your first mini prototype game. Cool. I'll see you soon.